I think it's really important when you decide that you're going to change your habits and change the patterns of behavior that make you feel stuck or that you can't stand anymore, that are the result of surviving trauma. You got to be compassionate with yourself and patient, because a great analogy for the patterns that you learned that you're now stuck with right now, it feels like as an adult, is this. You spent how many years as a race car driver? How many years?
27.
How many? 27 years. Imagine if when you retired, I said, okay, you're going to play football now. And I expect you to be the best.
That's tall order. I mean, that's an overwhelming proposal, you know?
Yes. It's going to take years for you to learn a brand new sport.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to take small daily practice and studying and being patient with yourself to build new muscles and skills. And the truth is, you might never fully build new muscles and skills. It might never come easily or naturally, but over time, you could learn to be an excellent football player. But what you have to have compassion for is the fact that for the first 27 years, you were not playing football, you were driving a race car. And those are very different patterns. So if you're going to go from a situation where you have a pattern of withdrawing into yourself or lying or snapping at people or whatever your pattern is in response to uncertainty, it's literally the equivalent of teaching yourself to go from being a professional race car driver to a professional football player.
Foreign. Just
Two
feels foreign.
totally different skills, totally different neural pathways. And so when you kind of understand that you can do it, but it's going to take time. And I think one of the things that was the most eye-opening thing that I have ever learned was this. And I only learned this recently. One of the reasons why behavior change is so frustrating and it's so hard, and
So
you got
hard.
to use all these tools in order to trick your brain and to plow new neural pathways in and to form new habits. The reason why it's so hard is because when you and I are talking about changing our behavior, or we're talking about trauma pattern, or we're talking about the shit that we do that we want to change and we're really frustrated by, we're using the conscious part of our brain. We're using the prefrontal cortex. Talking about behavior change is easy to do. The reason why it's so difficult is you and I can sit here and talk about it, and we can make a plan for it. And we can say, okay, the next time that you're in a situation where your husband gives you that look, and then you start to worry that, blah, 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 blah is going to happen. And you feel the rage come up in your body. Like, what used to drive me bananas is my husband would ask me a ton of questions. And in my opinion, they're obvious, stupid questions. And so, I, of course, feel like a royal asshole now, because we've come to find out that my husband has been struggling with long-term depression. And one of the reasons why he has a brain, why his brain is so foggy is because of depression. And it didn't help that he was smoking a ton of weed all the time too. And so, I would literally get so frustrated because we'd be talking about something and he would be like, well, I don't know. What do you think? Like, just asking questions. And I'm like, you should know the answer to that. What? Have you heard of Google? Why are you asking me what the weather is going to be, tomorrow in Vermont? Fucking Google. And I'd go like, ah. And I hated that about myself. Hated it. And I would talk to my therapist. I can't snap at him. I don't want, I need to be more patient. This is what my mom did. Like, she would get frustrated with my father, and now I'm doing it with Chris, and I don't want to be that person. Oh my God. I would talk about this topic probably for years. And I would make a plan to be calm, and I'd make a plan to put myself in pause. And then the next day or two, I'd get back in my life, and we'd be standing there having a conversation. And he would ask me a question that I think he should have Googled or should know the answer to. And then the rage would come. And it wasn't until I learned the fact that I was talking about the behavior that I wanted to change with this part of my brain. But the rage and the impatience and the kind of like, emotional reactiveness, that pattern is stored here in the basal ganglia. That pattern operates in my subconscious. And that pattern is not initiated by thinking. That pattern is initiated by emotions that rise up in the body. And it's only when you realize that the behavior change, particularly when it comes to generational patterns and trauma patterns, that in order to catch it, you've got to not only figure out the pattern you want to change, but you've got to figure out the situations and the emotions that you're feeling in your body that correspond to the pattern that you want to change. Because when I start to feel my ankles getting hot, I know that that feeling in my body, that emotion of frustration, that is the trigger. And the reason why I have this pattern, this is fascinating, is that, a lot of these patterns you learned like 0 to 2.
Yeah. I think they say 0 to 6, it's like last trimester to about 6 years old is the bulk of the subconscious programming, which is 95% of your operating system. Today.
Yeah. And they have this, there's this phenomenon in psychology called ghosts in the nursery, which mean, and I'll give you an explanation. So let's say we're looking at 18-month-old Mel Robbins. An 18-month-old Mel Robbins is sitting on the kitchen floor. And I've got the Tupperware drawer open, and 18-month-old Mel Robbins is lost because I am following my soul and I am playing with the Tupperware and I got this stuff all over and I've made a big mess and I'm just like happy as a little clam. And then all of a sudden around the corner, like my mom comes and she's walking around the corner and doesn't see me and slips and like, and just reacts. What happens in my nervous system is that her frustration with the mess and the blow up and the fact that I have a disruption in my nervous system because I'm startled, I literally sear her behavior with my emotional reaction.
Sure.
So frustration gets encoded in me. I don't even remember it. I'm 18 months old.
Yeah.
Frustration is always this emotional feeling in my body. And now I'm just literally copying the behavior I saw in the adults
You're kind
around
of a
me.
passenger at that point in time. It's almost autopilot.
Correct. And so because emotions rise up before your thoughts take hold.
Yeah.
It's super important to pay attention to your body. Is it a twitch in the stomach? Is it a clench in the, my husband says that when he feels kind of his pattern of withdrawing kick in, he first feels like his chest tighten. That's what he feels. That's how he knows one of those patterns from his past in his subconscious that he doesn't want as an adult is about to spin. And so if he can catch it here, he can say, oh, here it goes. I'm about to withdraw. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose something different. And so that's been wildly helpful. And it allowed me to go, oh, I get it. This is why. It's not that I'm a moron. It's that I'm talking about the behavior I want to change with one part of my brain, but the behavior itself is somewhere else. So I got to fight it in the region that it's in. And it's also really important. You can't just catch it. You can't just interrupt it. You must replace it with a new pattern of behavior because patterns repeat. So I want to give everybody the aha moment that I find to be so profound and so helpful that I have read in your work. And that is when you have shared that the reason why you can go to therapy or you can watch Dr. Nicole and I on this live stream and go like, bing, oh, cool, I can try that. I can do this. I can do that. The reason why it's so hard to implement behavior change has to do with the part of the brain that you're using when you are watching a video like this or reading a book that's a self-help book or listening to a podcast or you're in a therapy session where you're calm, and you're present and you're intellectual versus what's going to happen when you walk into the kitchen and you see that everybody in your family has made lunch and not made nothing for you and left a mess for you to clean up, and you lose your fucking mind, even though you promised you were going to practice self-healing.
Yeah.
Can you explain to everybody the two different modes of the brain, the one you use to learn shit and the one you're actually dealing with when it comes to changing conditioning and trauma patterns and all the shit that we all have, regardless of what we've experienced in life?
Yeah. So the reason why we're stuck is housed in a part of our brain called the subconscious. I talk about it so often now because this might sound really surprising to a lot of listeners, but in my 7-8 year program that I was in, and in the additional training that I did in psychology, I knew that the subconscious existed, but never once was this really explored and talked about and understood as going to be something that in the clinical room we're working with. It's really largely kept out of the room, and the part of the mind that's talked about more frequently in talk therapy is the conscious part of the mind. So to simplify, this is a really simplified version. Those are the two parts, the conscious and the subconscious. So the issue becomes the most commonly heard example of the subconscious. We're very grateful that we have our subconscious. That's the example that we hear when, right, I'm driving my car home. I mean, maybe not so many of us are driving now, but I'm driving my car home, right? I'm thinking about like, you know, what I have to do when I get home, maybe. And thankfully I'm alive at home, putting my key in the door, and I don't remember shit about my ride home. How did I get home? Quite literally, your subconscious drove you home. So we love our subconscious, because if we had to consciously attend to everything and remember how to do everything that goes along with being human each and every day, we would be completely debilitated.
By the way, let me just say something for everybody. The reason why your bones feel heavy and you feel like you have taken the SAT 4 times every day and you want to go to sleep at 5 o'clock right now in the middle of this quarantine and this global crisis is because you can't rely on your subconscious to go to the store. You got to be hyper vigilant. Yes. So you're using the part of the mind that you're normally not using all day, which is why you're fucking exhausted.
Yeah. And that's very, I love that you pointed that out, because calorically it benefits we have to remind ourselves that our brain is an actual organ. It lives in a physiological body. Hormones affect it, you know, our imbalance is affected. So it is an entity, and it takes it needs calories to run. And that's the reality of it too. Our brain prefers to run on subconscious autopilot, we like to call it, because it takes less calories. So the issue becomes, though, our subconscious, when we're born, remember, we're born physically and emotionally and spiritually, if you will, dependent on these caregivers. We quite literally cannot care for ourselves. That's the way humans are born. When we're born, our brains are actually shifting their brainwave patterns. So to really simplify it, for the first several years of our life, our brains are in a sponge mode. They're in theta wave state, it's called, which essentially just means that we're taking the world in. This might sound silly, but this is what we're doing. And we're learning how to human, right? We're learning how to be about the world, what these bodies do, how to take care of them. We have feelings. That's really complicated for humans. We're learning about our emotional, our energetic world. If you're a believer that we have a spiritual or soul-based entity, as I do, right, we're learning about all this. So we're taking it in. We're wide-eyed. That's why babies look wide-eyed. And we're coming up with, I call them programs, because I think the computer analogy is the best analogy, right? Beliefs, the programs are everything. Mel, from our habits, we are very habitual as humans, right? The things we do, a lot of times we do the same things we were modeled or taught to do by those around us. This involves self-care. How do we care for our physical bodies? We're very habitual in our beliefs about ourselves, about others, about the world. We're habitual in the feelings. We tend to gravitate around certain feeling states. Mine was stress. Mine was anxiety, right? We then even become habitual with how we cope with our feelings. We tend to do the same things. I kick and scream. You and I, we dissociate, we check out. So all of these habits, I call it our habit self, is stored in our subconscious. So why am I telling you this? All of this is formed at a time where we had no conscious control. The conscious part of our brain wasn't formed. That develops after, right? So we have all of these programs from all of this early time that are running, 95% of the day are running our habit life. We become an adult. I find a great life coach. I find some great therapists. I'm talking in these sessions from my conscious mind, from the mind that can analyze and view. I'm typically, maybe some sessions I'm emotionally activated, a lot I'm not. I'm maybe calm, I'm in baseline, right? Everything looks clearer. Those were those great conversations. Flash forward to during the week. During the week, I'm likely back in habit self. I'm emotionally reactive. Maybe my nervous system is dysregulated. That's a lot of what's happening now. We have a collective that's living a very real traumatic experience. So a lot of our nervous systems are becoming dysregulated. And in those moments, our conscious mind, literally, think about it like this, goes offline.
Right.
And we live those same reactions. And then we feel shameful that we kicked and screamed and yelled or dissociated again 3 days later because we know better. And now we have this spiral of stuck that happens.
You just explained decades of my life where I would say, and how many of you can relate to this? You know this thing you want to change about yourself. You do all this work to figure out what to do. And then you get into that exact same situation that you hoped and prayed and are just so committed to changing. And then you do the exact same damn thing. And so the piece that's really important that I want to unpack to make sure you get it and that it lands, because I think it will help with this shame spiral. Like, why can't I stop cheating? Why can't I put down the drink? Why do I keep screaming at my kids? Why do I keep letting the panic attacks come and I can't get the deep breathing thing? It's because when you talk to Dr. Nicole, and a lot of you are asking, who the hell, how do I find her? The Holistic Psychologist is her Instagram handle. Just get there and follow her. If you are thinking or talking about what you need to do, what part of the brain are you using, Dr. Nicole?
The conscious part of the brain.
The conscious part of your brain. But then you go out into your life and you are subject literally to all of the conditioning. I call them patterns. You can call them programming. They're all hardwired in your nervous system. So before your conscious brain can even get control of your ass, your nervous system and the subconscious part of your brain is like, I recognize this situation. This is where I'm trained to scream. And you suddenly find yourself screaming at everybody when you had promised yourself today you would try to hold it together. And then, of course, you beat yourself up. And this is why you're stuck. It's because we're trying to change with the conscious part, but it's our nervous system that's in control. Am I getting this right?
100%. And even more, to piggyback on this and really hammer this home, our nervous system actually does operate below awareness. It is scanning our environment to keep the organism that is us safe, to house, the organism that is us, to keep this physical body alive, outside of our awareness. So that removes us even further from control. Meaning, if that's what happens, if I'm walking down a street and it's dark, right, my nervous system might be starting to activate myself. If I get that hair on the top of my back of my neck standing up, right? So what did that? I might not consciously be even noting anything's amiss, but my nervous system is online and is sensing whether it's energetically a shift or whatever it is. So I really want to hammer that home, because especially with those of us, and I believe most of us share a version of trauma.
Yep.
I'm a believer in beyond the big T that most of us kind of have historically designated as the traumatic experiences. I believe most humans have suffered a traumatic experience. So when that's the case, this is why I highlight this, our nervous system is going to call the shots. It's going to, especially with the climate now, throw us into that fear-based, likely is what's happening for a lot of listeners, reaction. And we actually do lack control, because that's hovering so beneath the surface that it's going to call our shots before our conscious mind can even have a chance.
What are the 3 fundamental needs that every child has? And what happens to you as a child if these 3 fundamental needs are not met?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where I introduce this more expanded definition, because I believe that not having the fundamental needs of being seen, being heard, and given the space, I think is the best way to word it, to be authentically expressed, to be acknowledged as a different, authentic being than everyone else around you, because that's what we all are. We're all different and unique. Those are our needs: to be seen, to be heard, and to be authentically expressed. And
can
when
you
they're
unpack
not
those just a little bit more? So what does it mean to be seen? What does it mean to be heard? And what does it mean to be given the space as a child to be authentically expressed? Let's unpack each one of those and then talk about how if you don't get one of those met by your caregiver, how it creates trauma in your nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we are, as I see it, we have physical bodies, we have emotional bodies, and we have spiritual bodies. And we come into this world, in a uniqueness. We are born, however, most of us into some family system. Some of us, maybe it's with one caregiver, with other of us have bigger, larger extended families. We're clearly born into societies and relationships. Humans are an interpersonal species, meaning we have relationships with others. It's how we become successful as a species. So when we come, right, remembering that we are being modeled how to be in the world of being human, one of the things that we're also being modeled is ourselves, right? We don't know anything about this body that we're in. I don't know how to make sense of what this experience of life is, right? So we need help, and we look to our caregivers for that help. And to speak to your point, this isn't about right or wrong or good or bad in terms of parenting. This is how intergenerational patterns are transmitted, because we cannot teach or we cannot model, and that's how children learn. We learn by modeling. That old adage, do what I say, not as I do. Actually, right? It's quite opposite. Children are actually going to be watching what you do, even if you say in contradiction to that, right? So all of this is happening. We're navigating life. We're learning about ourselves. And when we are not, so if we don't have a parent who got modeled self-care behaviors, or who came to understand who they are emotionally, energetically, and spiritually, because they were not given the tools to do that, chances are they're not going to be able to provide you with that. Right. Oftentimes what happens too, very well-intentioned, sometimes a caregiver will have had a painful childhood experience, and to overcompensate will decide, I will never have my child experience this, and will actually, best intention, engage in some overcompensatory modeling of conditioned behaviors that also aren't helpful. So short of it is, right, if you don't have a parent who's not only teaching you how to care for your unique physical body, which means you have different needs, nutritional needs, you like different things, your body does well with different levels of sleep than other people, right? If you don't have a parent that's helping you to be seen in that way, to explore, right, your physical needs, you're probably not going to know how to connect with your body and listen to your body's needs. Similar with emotions, right? We don't understand emotions. They're big, they're overwhelming, like I was saying earlier. If you don't have a parent, right, that can sit down and help you explore your emotions when you're having them, from the sensations that the child is having in their body, to then giving that a name, right? That's how we communicate with emotions. I feel mad. Then exploring with the child how they feel better when they feel mad. Because this is, again, where we're unique, the authentic piece. To be seen in her as a unique, now energetic being. What makes you feel better now when you're sad might be the farthest thing that makes me feel better. It might me feel worse when I'm sad, right? So these are the ways that parents can help shape, ideally, a child to be seen, heard, and authentic, so that they then, over time, developmentally, as we develop the skills to do so, now we can engage in those habits and we can understand how to care. And I'm going to be the first one to admit this, because I spent no time in my physical body, I had no idea how to run this. I didn't know when I was hungry. I didn't know when I was full. I didn't know what made me feel good. I thought things made me feel good that didn't end up making me feel good. Right. It turns out, let alone my emotional world, forget it. I'm still learning my emotional landscape each and every day. I'm learning how to put words to feelings. I'm learning how to communicate. I'm learning how to regulate, especially when I'm really having a big feeling. And then the whole spiritual world, that was completely absent. No one ever taught me or showed me about that aspect of my being. So now it's about cultivating. And that's what reparenting is. It's going back in those areas and acknowledging the ways or the conditioned patterns that I might be living that don't serve me, often passed on, and then creating change, making a choice. I use the term small daily promise, because change is hard, picking a small way to integrate a new habit. That's what reparenting is showing up for ourselves now as the wise parent that knows and learning how to know ourselves at that level.
So basically, every human being, once they leave their parents' house, regardless of how amazing or not the parents are, everybody needs to go through some form of reparenting, because for better or for worse, you were conditioned by your parents to believe certain things, to have certain behavior patterns, and to have certain beliefs about yourself. And if you weren't seen, if you weren't heard, if you weren't given the space to be truly yourself, and even worse, if those things were denied to you out of abuse or abandonment, that is trauma, correct?
Absolutely. And even more so, sometimes oftentimes our denial, I talk about denial of reality, isn't even in instances of abuse or neglect or abandonment. For instance, for me, there was such a culture just of general denial in my family where we all had these agreed upon narratives of the family, and any narrative outside of there was just not spoken about. There was no room for it. So that's even a version of denial. So if I show up and I have a different experience of this event and I go to talk about it in my family, if I'm a child or whoever, right? Sometimes you'll hear, oh, that's not what happened. Or this is actually, right? That's another version of this denial of reality. The more that happens, the more I doubt myself and my reality, because my intuition is pinging, and a lot of children, they'll present this, oh, daddy's upset. No, he's not. Well, the child is having an energetic experience of daddy, and daddy might be upset to that child. And when that's denied, the more it happens, now you could have an adult that's like myself, that when they register, something happening, their voice now overrides it. Oh, that's not what's happening.
Well, now there's like a mad rush of young people looking to see if you will adopt them, because that's my first thought. My second thought was, okay, so when my daughter has anxiety, or my son has anxiety, my daughter more so will struggle with anxiety, and she's pretty open about it. There's a part of me that wants to fix it, and there's a part of me that's like, how can you have anxiety when I'm your mom and we talk about these things and I pump you up, and you have, you don't need to do anything to be amazing. And so she just gets this incredible pep talk. Like, most people would die that's like prose, basically, to read that and to be so encouraged. And so many people, not only do they not get that encouragement from their own parents, they don't get it from anyone.
Right.
So to think that she's getting that, and she's, her parents are together, and she's had this incredible opportunity to have someone pour into her all of her life, yet she still struggles with anxiety.
Crippling.
And so as a parent, that's something I'm always wanting, I struggle with that. Is it something I've done? Is it the manic way that I live my life? Am I the person who's giving her, because I don't have anxiety, so am I giving her anxiety?
So I have no idea. Here's the most important thing. It doesn't matter what you think or what you're feeling. Mm-hmm. Because the anxiety is her felt experience.
That's right.
Right? And as parents, I think one of the most heartbreaking and frustrating things is that oftentimes you have somebody in your life that you love, a son, a daughter, a partner, and you see all the amazing things about them, and they don't see any of it. Mm-hmm. And so this is also one of the big things in the book that we write about how your own mind has a filter in it, this thing called the reticular activity system. And that the filter in your brain is very different than the filter in anybody else's brain. And it's constantly changing in real time based on what you think is important to it. So this is all chapters, I think 4 through 7, we go through all this and teach you how to change the filter. You've experienced this filter, by the way. Mm-hmm. So when you go to buy a new car, right now, everybody's seeing Broncos everywhere, right? The new Bronco is out.
Okay,
now there's one.
Now
right.
I will. I
Yes.
hadn't,
so
but now I will.
So when's the last time you bought a car?
In December.
Okay, and what happened once you decided what kind of car you were going to
I
sell?
keep seeing that car everywhere.
Correct.
And when I see the same car in the same color, I try to run them off the road.
Yes, and so that's your brain changing the way it filters the world in real time because of what it thinks is important to you. So if I think, for example, that your daughter is beautiful, and your daughter thinks that she's the ugliest or the biggest of all her friends or whatever, it doesn't matter what I think.
Right.
It matters what she thinks. Mm-hmm. And when you tell yourself over and over that you're not good enough, or you're a failure, or you're this, or you're that, your brain actually thinks it's important. I can give you an example. So my husband went into the restaurant business. It was a dream of his. And this is actually all part of the origin story of the 5-second rule. And he and his best friend launched these little pizza joints outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And it ends up not going great. And they work at it super, super hard for 7 years. And at the end of the business, they sold it for pennies on the dollar to the next investor. They left the business, and they did not return the profit that they had hoped to return to their investors. Now, our best friend, Chris's business partner, was able to leave that business and go, entrepreneurship. I'm proud of myself.
Sure.
We worked so hard. And yeah, did we do what we set out? No, but you know what? I feel good about what I did. My husband couldn't do that. He left that business and said, that failed, I'm a failure.
Oh.
And for
Was that his first big entrepreneurial?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And for 7 years, he would drag that into the bathroom every morning.
Oh.
And the human being he saw staring back at him in the mirror was a failure because of that thing. That's actually why most people have anxiety, or because because they resist the high five habit, because they are dragging their entire past into the bathroom and saying, because of these things that have been done to me, or these things that I did that I wish I could change, I now see a person who does not deserve a high five.
Yeah.
And so you withhold the thing that you need to forgive yourself, to love yourself.
The thing that you would give to anyone else.
That's also why people feel anxious.
Well, let's talk about that. Worry and anxiety,
Yes.
the difference between the two.
You got it.
Because I don't worry, and it's almost a problem. I feel, and I've talked about it before.
Why do you think you don't worry?
Well, I had my brain scanned, and Dr. Amen says I just don't have blood flow in that area. So part of it's genetic. Part of it is my faith.
Yep.
Part of it is the way I was raised. Like, you just roll with everything. So, and my parents, I don't think were worriers. So I never learned the worry habit. I think that's part of it.
But then to your point, it's interesting. How did my daughter learn it? Right? If your daughter's struggling with it.
Yes.
I'm going to fan myself because I actually think I might be having a hot flash.
Oh, that's so fantastic, because that's another thing we talk a lot about is
You just let
the
us
change.
know. Who cares?
I haven't had any hot flashes yet.
What?
I shouldn't even.
How is that even
I probably
possible?
just jinxed myself.
Yes,
I don't know.
that's
My mom
right.
didn't have a lot of hot flashes either.
It happens more and more.
But so I don't worry. I don't
All
worry.
right, so let me tell you the difference. So worrying is nothing more than worrying is always about the future, by the way. Mm-hmm. It's never about the present moment.
True.
And so worrying is when your thoughts start to sound an alarm about what's going to happen.
Okay.
So it's the what if this, what if that, what if the other thing, what if loop that you can get trapped into. Mm-hmm. Anxiety is when your body state changes.
So worry is all the things that are happening in your head.
Yeah.
Oh, and anxiety you feel.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That helps me.
Yes.
Okay. So, and you're still having the thoughts too.
Correct.
Okay.
But a lot of times what will happen is that your body state can get so agitated that you even stop being present to what you're worried about, because now your mind goes, I feel like I'm going to throw up. I feel like my heart is racing. And you start to obsess over the physiology of your body. And I'm going to explain kind of even more about this.
Super helpful.
Panic is now the big brother of all of this. So worry's the little baby. Then we got the middle schooler, which is feeling it in your body. And then you got the big, teenager of a panic attack, which is when the body state gets so scared and upset that now your brain has an emergency system that says, we're going to get you out of here. So if you've ever been around somebody who panics, they're not rational.
No.
They're immediately like, I need to get out of the room.
I'm going to die.
I'm going to die. Like they go into a mode of get me out of here as a way to rescue themselves from a body that's now sounding a 5 alarm kind of fire. So there are 2 ways that anxiety can come on, this anxiety thing in your body. You can either start with your mind and all the what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happened? It can happen as you're scrolling through social media and you start to see that your friends all went out and they didn't invite you. Thanks a lot. Or you see the person that's, exercising and you start going, but I didn't exercise. And you start thinking, it's never going to work out for me. Or you see all the couples and then you start thinking, what if I never meet anybody? So it can start with the thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And then your body starts to go, uh-oh. And your stomach gets tense and your armpits sweat and your heart starts to race. And that's how it ramps up. Or if you have trauma stored in your body from anything in your childhood or anything in your past, there will be times that you feel a surge of anxiety come on and you don't know why.
So there is no precursor. There's no, you're saying for certain people or in certain situations, you might just be washing the dishes and suddenly you have anxiety come on.
Correct.
And so I want, and again, I'm asking these questions because I haven't felt it. Yeah.
If it's a trauma response, it's because your nervous system just remembered something from your past. So I'll give
Like
you
subconsciously?
I'll give you a really, really common example that we've found in all the research that we've done and the people that we've coached. A lot of people get very on edge as the sun goes down. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because if you grew up in a chaotic or abusive household, that's when people were coming home from work.
Yeah.
that's when the drinking began.
Or you came home from school.
Correct. If you hear tires on a gravel road, if you hear a beer can crack open, if you smell a certain cologne, those can be things that set you on edge.
Sure.
And that's
A
not even
trigger.
something you're consciously aware of. It's your body remembering something.
Yeah.
And your body's now trying to help you by going, pay attention, this is that thing, this is that thing. But then you're standing there washing your dishes, you feel this thing happen, and you're like, why am I feeling nervous? Why is my son? And then your thoughts go. This is how it escalates. So it's
So can I ask,
Yeah.
somebody who feels anxiety all the time,
that's generalized anxiety, and that's what that's
and is that a physical feeling that you feel all the time?
what that is there's an entire chapter around this book that'll change your life. I think it's chapter 7. It's called High-Fiving Your Heart.
Yeah.
So when you're on edge all the time, let me teach you about your nervous system.
Yes.
Because I think everybody on the planet right now, having come out of the last 18 months, everybody is right now in a state of fight or flight. Everybody's nervous system is fried and on edge. Everybody is prone to being triggered because you have just gone through a level of sustained uncertainty that no human nervous system can manage.
Yeah.
So here's what everybody needs to know. You have 2 nervous systems, okay? You have something called the sympathetic nervous system, which is basically fight or flight.
Right.
This is your anxiety state. This is being on edge. This is feeling like the next shoe is going to drop. This is what psychologists call being dysregulated, okay? The second nervous system that you have is called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that is your calm, cool, grounded, resting nervous system. That's how we want you to go through your day.
Yeah.
Because when you are grounded in your body and you feel comfortable in your own skin, first of all, your prefrontal cortex can work. Secondly, you won't be as easily triggered. Third, you'll feel more optimistic and focused. And so I want to teach you a simple trick using science to switch off this on edge nervous system and switch on the really positive one. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to use something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a treasure, as you know, in your body. And it runs from your rear end all the way up to the top of your head, through every organ, through your vocal cords. All you're going to do is take your hands, put them right here in the center of your chest. You're going to press down. You're going to take a deep breath. And then you're going to say these 3 sentences. I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm loved.
I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm loved.
Yeah. What did you feel when you did that?
I believe those things. I feel good.
Yeah.
I feel calmer.
Yeah.
So I suppose that brings you into that state.
Yes. And pressing here actually tones the vagus nerve, which is an on-off button between the on edge and the calm and cool. It's like a treasure. And so here's a couple things I want you to know. There are some mornings you might wake up and you need to do it 53 times. There are days you might stand in the grocery store and somebody cuts you off with their cart and it just sends you reeling. Hands on heart. Give your heart a high five. Pull yourself back into your body. Switch off that stress response. Switch on your grounded, calm, in control response.
Do you recommend people do that? I mean, is there a
Every
way
morning.
to put the brake on if you're someone who can pretty easily slip into a panic attack?
Yes. So this is something you want to start to do immediately. And I recommend you do it right after you get out of bed. Because I would like for you, before you get into the bathroom mirror, I would like for you to be present and on edge. And I would like for you to be grounded in your body when you start your day. It's an incredible gift that you can give yourself because you'll feel more in control and centered and present. And then when you step in front of that mirror, you will actually be able to be with yourself and to understand, okay, what do I need from myself today?
Yeah.
And it completely changes that moment. The other reason why this is important is because if your nervous system is on edge, and that's your default, yes, you're going to be way more prone to a panic attack because you are already idling at such a stressed out level, and all the chemical releases from the cortisol and everything else that's flooding your body. We need to get you back into a more neutral and grounded state. So that'll help for sure. And so it's important to understand, are my worries starting in my head or are they actually a felt experience in my body? Because then depending upon which or both it is, you can use 2 totally different strategies. First of all, this high-fiving your heart absolutely will work for trauma. It does not get rid of it. It helps you manage and live with it. I would recommend EMDR. I would also recommend...
We're big fans of EMDR.
Yeah, and the guided psychedelic modalities are incredible. I've done those for childhood trauma, and they've been unbelievable.
Amazing.
And so those sorts of things really help you heal trauma. This will help you control it, live with it, not be afraid of it in terms of being able to settle your nervous system.
You've experienced anxiety, you said, all your life.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions around that. Number one, controlling it, managing it. What are your thoughts and your experiences with medication, SSRIs?
Oh, great question. So I took Zoloft from the age of 22 until probably 44.
Okay.
It was life-changing. It was
Life-saving or life-changing or both?
both. It was the latter I needed to get out of a hole because when I finally got diagnosed with anxiety, I have a very interesting story because I fall into the group of women, and I know you do too, that were completely part of what they call the lost generation.
Yeah.
So when they came out, as you know, with the ADHD and ADD diagnosis back in the 70s.
Just a boy thing.
Just a boy thing, yeah. And the symptoms for women present completely differently. And when you don't treat ADHD, you tend to get anxiety.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge group of women our age that were treated and medicated for anxiety in their late teens and early 20s when the actual issue was ADD.
It's still happening today.
Oh, of course it is. Yes. It's actually one of these things I'm super passionate about getting out into the world.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I discovered the 5-second rule and I started to do the part that you can do to interrupt the worry loop, which when you can cut the anxiety off at its knees by cutting off the worry cycle, you stop the escalation in your body.
Okay.
And so I can teach you guys how to do that. It's super simple. It's
Let's do it.
super
Let's do
effective.
it. Yeah.
There's one other thing I want to teach you about anxiety, though, that also is incredibly empowering because it makes so much sense. So anxiety has a purpose. Really important one, actually. Anxiety and that anxiety response in your body gets you to pay attention.
Yeah.
If you go into a state of being hyper alert before a test, you'll do better if you're not worried.
Absolutely.
Same with performance. Same with sports. Like it's really, and also it alerts you to danger. So for example, if you and I were driving after this interview to go get a cup of coffee and somebody suddenly swerves in front of us
Yes.
and we whip the car,
Yes.
what are you going to feel in your body?
Feels like butterflies. I'll shake.
Yep.
Sweat maybe.
Yep.
A little bit of panic.
Yep.
And your muscles tense up.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. So you just had a panic attack in the car.
Oh.
But the reason why it wasn't scary is because
It made
intellectually
sense.
it made sense.
It made sense. Yeah, like of course I almost died.
Yeah, the swerving was your brain taking over to get you out of there. That's a panic attack,
Yes.
basically.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
In a way that's healthy.
Yeah.
And then when
Serves us.
Yeah, when the car pulls away, what happens in your body?
You start to look. It stays for a minute. You know, but then you start to go like, okay, I'm safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What happens for people that struggle with anxiety is they have that response and it doesn't make any sense because they don't understand it. So it escalates because they get afraid of it. And once you're afraid of
this? Yes,
anxiety
yes.
coming on, then you actually make it last longer because you're resisting the up and down of it. And so there's two things that you can do. First, what I want you to do is I want you to write down, well, actually, first what you do is for a week, anytime you catch yourself time traveling ahead
Yeah.
or worrying,
Yeah.
use the 5-second rule and interrupt it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and just say, I'm not thinking about that. Mm-hmm. You want to build a muscle of catching yourself hanging out in the worry loop.
Oh, catch yourself when you're hanging out there. Okay.
Yeah. You're thinking about your roommate situation this fall, and it's not even this fall yet. You're worried about what classes you're going to get. You're worried about whether or not you're going to lose the weight before the reunion. You're worried about whether or not anyone's going to hire you because you've been home staying. Like you're like sitting here just in the doom loop, right?
I do this with my daughter, and so I'm curious if you can give me some advice from someone who has it, because again, I don't know her experience, but we will get into this dialogue. We just did it last night. She's planning her wedding and she's launching a beauty brand. And so she was going through like all of the what ifs thoughts in her head. And she was like, I'm so anxious. And so I'm dismissing each one of her what ifs and what ifs. And I just keep dismissing it and dismissing it and dismissing it. And then I'm like the toxic positivity mother, like, so you're not worried, okay? Good night. I'm going to bed, but you're not worried and you're not anxious.
Well, so when somebody who's anxious brings their problems to people, people are like, well, because here's the thing. I did this for years.
Okay.
And my kids' anxiety just escalated.
Okay.
So there are two mistakes all parents make.
I'm taking notes.
All parents make these two mistakes, including yours truly. I mean, I caused my kids years of therapy because of these mistakes. And myself, of course, for blaming myself for making these mistakes. Number one is invalidating the worry.
Okay.
We think we're helping our kids by going, let me tell you all the reasons why you don't need to worry about that.
Okay.
What actually happens is you shove your kid further into the corner because they don't feel seen or heard.
Ooh. Okay.
This will change your life as a parenting method.
Okay.
You
Okay.
ready?
Yep.
This is all you say. Would you like me to give you advice, or do you just need me to listen?
Okay. Okay. I can do that.
95% of the time, my kids say, I just need you to listen.
Okay.
They're getting it out of their head by coming to you.
Yeah.
And I have the same dynamic with one of my daughters where she comes to me and I've become her blankie emotionally.
Sure.
And then I immediately try to go, but that's not an issue and that's not an issue. And that's good that you have that fight with that friend because she's a jerk anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she just is coming to be heard. That's it. And I keep the anxiety around because she's not resolving it in a healthy way because I'm fighting with her about whether or not it's actually legitimate to feel this way. So I'm also making her feel less than for having these worries.
I trust you. I trust you when you say this. But there's a part of me that feels like, but she doesn't see the, like, you know, if she's struggling with this, I just have to explain to her
but it's
that
not,
this is how it will work.
But here's the thing. Here's the second mistake. We think it's our job as parents to fix the things they're worried about.
Absolutely. It feels like an obligation. You're only as happy as your least happy child, they say.
But here's the thing. When you step in to fix it,
yeah.
you are telling your child, I don't think you can.
Right. Absolutely.
Or I don't think you can face this.
You don't have what it takes.
Yes.
Let me do it for you.
Yes. And I made this mistakes for years. I was creating a learned helplessness in my kids. I was entrenched in this toxic pattern of my daughter coming to me with her concerns and worries, which were very, very valid, and me trying to fix them because I was worried. But all she felt was, Mom doesn't hear me. And this is actually a big deal. And she thinks that simple solution is going to fix it. And the truth is, the simple solution always fixes it. But she's not coming to you about the stuff she's talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
She's actually expressing that deeper emotion of this hurts, or I'm scared, or I don't feel good enough. And when we stay up here, like, let's get rid of this and let's take care of that and don't think about it this way, we're just trying to help. We just love them.
Yeah.
The deeper thing, the deeper wound that they keep having trigger this anxiety, it doesn't actually get addressed. And so when you listen and just listen and listen, anything else, great. Is there anything you need from me? Because then what happens is you're teaching them how to think strategically, make requests, and ask for the help that they need.
Yeah.
This all comes back to, by the way, this high five habit in the mirror. Because if you can't stand in the mirror and see a human being that's trying, that's struggling, that's anxious, that feels insecure, and still go, I hear all that and I got you. And we're going to get through it. You're going to constantly be seeking that assurance in everybody else about the surface level things in your life. When the real issue is something much deeper. And when you start to connect with yourself at a deeper level every single morning and see a human being and celebrate them, no matter where they are, even if the wedding stuff is falling apart, or the bridesmaids are complaining with each other, and I don't even know the stuff, or you're just worried you're not going to fit into the dress, or you're worried about where people are going to sit at the tables, or you're worried about who's going to show up,
all
or you're
the
worried
things.
about, like, all the things. You can stand with yourself with all those things going on and still love and support and celebrate yourself, and know that no matter what happens, whether the seating arrangement gets right or not, or that you got your own back.
Yeah.
You're going to see yourself through it.
I love that you're a fan of therapy. You talk about it. And also finding out the right medication, maybe even, like you said, knowing if you have the right diagnosis. Like, that's huge because
it's so liberating.
Once you like really truly understand your brain, which, we can probably spend a whole nother hour talking about that. It just doesn't make sense that right now the standard of care is we ask a couple of questions. We don't look at the organ, and then we decide what's going on with you. Are you a fan of therapy for kids, and at
Hell
what
yes.
age? And
Any age you need it. I'm a fan of talking about everything.
yeah, did you send your kids to therapy?
When they needed it, absolutely. When our kids, when our son started sleeping on the floor
At what
at
age?
the age of 8, and it went from one night,
His bedroom or on the floor in your room?
Ours.
Okay.
and it went from one night to 3 months. Yeah, we got a therapist, all right.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to learn, I'm really screwing this up because by letting him stay on the floor, I'm actually communicating, you're right. You're not strong enough to sleep through the night.
So this brought up an email I got from a mom this week who said she ended up with a daughter who ended up being very suicidal, extreme bullying, etc.
Yeah.
And she kept telling her, like, it's going to make you tougher. This is how girls are. Like, you're going to be okay. I went through this in middle school too, all those things. And she said, the one thing I regret not doing was taking it serious
Die
enough.
by suicide?
No.
Oh,
Daughter's
okay.
alive.
When you said regret, I was like, oh,
Her regret was that she didn't transfer her to another school
Yeah.
and realize it was. So, when I think about like, okay, you can fix it yourself. I believe in you. I trust you. How do we find that balance?
Well, I think in extreme situations like that, you got to listen to your kid and the experts.
Yeah.
Like if your kid is crying that much for help and is suicidal, get them out of the environment they're in.
Yeah.
Period. If you have a kid that's got chronic anxiety and they're starting to opt out of life, you need support in supporting them in inching toward the things that are scaring them, because it's only through facing the things that are scaring them. And that doesn't mean striding into a school where you're getting bullied to the point of wanting to die by suicide.
Yeah.
But if you're afraid to go out, they're afraid to go out of the house, or afraid to invite somebody over, or afraid to...
Which is really common right now in this age group, like 13 to 19.
I think it's also common coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it probably has a lot to do with that. They're afraid to drive their cars. They're afraid to go off of social media.
See,
yet
I
they
think
hate
that
being
this,
on
by
it.
the
Like,
way, is a lot of our overparenting. I think that we have so bubble wrapped our kids because we don't want them... It hurts when your kid is in pain, that we don't force them to do things that are a struggle. And I've certainly succumbed to this. After a long day of work, do I want to fight with my kid about whether or not they should have their phone in the room? No.
right. That's
Should I
honest.
have done that sooner? Of course. Because what I didn't realize about our kids and their phones is that part of the problem with phones in their bedrooms after a certain hour is they feel obligated
Yes.
to be available to their friends.
And to know what's going on with everyone everywhere.
Yep. And so there is a psychology driver that is more powerful than they are. And as parents, it's important to kind of know when to draw the line and when not, even though it hurts, even though they're going to hate you. Look at the same stuff our parents said to us, but I think it's more complicated with technology. It really is, because they're on their laptops for school. And they're on their phones doing FaceTime in study groups, and they're on their phones in FaceTime playing video games, and that's how a lot
They
of
were
them
on their
socialize.
phones and on their devices, and they were forced to be so,
Right.
like first graders all the way through the
Well,
pandemic.
I remember being on the phone upstairs, talking to my best friend Jody Bricken, in secret at 11 o'clock
with
at
one
night.
of the cords that
Yeah,
went
and
like
all
that.
of a sudden, mortified because my father picks up and is like, all right, you two, I can hear you. Hang up the phone. You're like, oh my God, okay, hang up the phone. I gotta go, Jody. We're way up past our bedtime.
Yeah.
And we are not doing that with our kids
Right.
because they have a whole world in their hand. And so I do think one really important thing that we put in place way too late was a basket in the kitchen with a charging station. And after a certain time, our kids had to have it in the
I
basket.
love that tip. I
And
love
that's
that tip.
where my phone goes in my bathroom at night. That's
Yeah.
where I charge it, even in a hotel, no matter where I am, because I can't be trusted.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab it and look at it.
Yeah. Well, talking about the high five habit,
Yeah.
I was in preparation for our time together today, I was thinking about how that's like one of the first things you teach kids. Like if you notice, like little kids, they learn to wave goodbye and they go high five, and so why not teach them this habit and to give it to themselves too. And so
No,
that's
it
what I
has
love
to
about
give
the
it
book.
to
It's
yourself.
so
Yes.
helpful for people any age. You're not saying like this is going to fix somebody who's has some deeper issues to deal with, but it's a good
Let me
strategy.
tell you a story. Let me tell you a story. So a really important story that I think, actually there's two. One is in the book and one happened yesterday.
Okay.
So a woman who was in a domestic violence shelter. massive childhood trauma, just escaped a very abusive relationship. She's lost everything. And she wrote to us from a domestic violence shelter and said that what the high five habit has taught her after 5 days is that she knows that she has a lifetime of healing ahead of her. She knows she has a tremendous amount of work to do, but now she knows that she can have her own back. And that's like one of those moments where when that clicks inside somebody, now it's not going to change the reality of what she's facing. It's not going to change the very real obstacles that she has from a psychological and economic, everything perspective.
But it was the moment.
Her
Yeah.
and her ability to rise up and to face these things. And the second one was yesterday. So this circulated in an email to our team this morning because I like to see from our audience what's the impact of what we're doing. And so we circulate an email every morning with screenshots of comments or emails or stuff of what people are saying. And there was a woman that said, now keep in mind, the High Five Habit book is not even out yet. I've only just shared it on social media. Can't even really get into the deep science, which we only like scratched at the surface on in our conversation. She said that she was at an AA meeting and somebody stood up in the AA meeting and shared the High Five Habit.
You're kidding.
No, and said to everybody, you have got to get on the bandwagon with this. Because we all need to wake up every day and see a human being who is trying.
Wow.
And who needs encouragement and support.
Wow.
And to think that a simple idea backed by science is already going viral and helping people not only help themselves, but help other people by sharing it.
Yeah.
It is the most just magical and exquisite thing in the world.
And it's got to feel amazing.
It does.
Can I stop you right there? Because that happened to me when I was 28 years old, where I was in a seminar. Somebody was sharing a story regarding sexual abuse when they were little. And when they mentioned a sibling being nearby, it triggered me remembering something. And I would love to have you talk a little bit about that sort of period of time where the memory comes flooding back in, and how you or what allowed you to say that's not just a memory that actually happened. Because I think that flooding happens for a lot of people, but it's the accepting or saying that it's real. And I'd be curious, given what a deep thinker you are and what a spiritual guide you are, if you have anything that you could offer about that space between remembering and actually believing.
I will say that if your body remembers, if you're feeling into a memory, it is indeed real. And you may not have all the information around it, but your body is revealing a somatic experience of trauma that has become safe enough in that moment to come to the surface. It took me a full year to fully accept that this was true. It can take people a lifetime. Most people in my 12-step meetings, when I would talk about it in women's meetings, they'd all say, me too, me too, me too. But I'm over that, or I'm not good. Or yeah, some weird things happened to me when I was a kid, or my dad was always weird towards me, or whatever. And just sort of be like, but that didn't really happen. Right.
Right.
Because the shame and the terror of the trauma, and this goes for any trauma, is so impermissible that we will do whatever we can to avoid having to ever face into it.
Hold on one second. I need to shut this door. I hear these guys. There we go. Okay. There we go.
And that really speaks to some of what's occurring right now for you, because we have these exiled child parts of ourselves that are locked up, tucked away, never to be spoken of again, because there's so much shame and so much terror and beliefs of inadequacy and not being lovable. And we build up these major protectors: addiction, anxiety, dissociation, rage, control, workaholism, just all of the above. And those are all what in IFS, internal family systems therapy, we call protector parts. And the protectors go on high alert to manage the exiles. And so they work. For you right now, my love, let me help like neutralize by saying this is such a textbook moment. And I don't want to take away the truth of it, but I also want to just sort of neutralize it by saying this is so natural. You're facing into trauma. You're having a huge life event. You've left your home have many, many years. You're moving into a new space. Things are changing personally, professionally. Change. Typical control protectors are being dismantled. Exiles are peeking their head out of the closet. Protectors are fucking coming in saying anxiety has to swoop in and dissociation has to swoop in. And all of it is like, no, little people don't come out. So what I want to acknowledge is that this is the human experience of people living with not fully processed trauma yet, right? Which is all of us, all of the human condition. And for those of us like you and I who have had big T trauma, the protectors are the same as all other people's protectors. Ours are just a bit more extreme.
Right.
But the great news is this: we all have inside of us what is known as self energy with a capital S. And self is, you might consider it your higher self, or I love to refer to it as like the internal parent. We have an undamaged, resourced self. And that self has many qualities: courage, compassion, curiosity, calmness, creativity, connectedness. And so when I was speaking to your parts earlier, saying to your anxiety and saying to your dissociation, I have a lot of compassion for you. And I'm curious, offline, I'd love to get to know you more and be there for you. And I also am a calm energy towards you. That's my self energy speaking to those parts of you that are activated. But the cool news is that you have that self energy within you too. And just even co-regulating with me right now, we can connect on this beautiful value of these parts and thank them. We can connect on the up-leveling that's happening, celebrate the up-leveling. We can connect on the safety that you've created for yourself, taking the medication again, bringing yourself back to a safer baseline, and acknowledge and honor that going through the journey of even slightly lifting the curtain on those exiled parts is fucking terrifying.
Why is that? Like, I sit here and I go, I think a lot about how intellectually, you were talking about from the outside, I got it all handled. Intellectually, it doesn't seem that scary. But there is something, you're right, that's terrifying. What are the exiled parts? Because I think
they're the little children. They're the little kids. A girl that was abused, the little girl that was in terror and got stuck there.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I did some work with my therapist around my little girl, the traumatized girl. And she was just trying to get to the girl. And I was like, no. We got to get to the protection mechanism in front of the girl. And it was like, I saw this huge wall of ice, like glass, but like almost like icy glass. And I said, okay, I'm ready to take a sledgehammer to that glass. And so I started sledgehammering the glass and cleared it out. And behind the glass was this little girl. She was like 6, frozen, totally enclosed in a like full ball of ice. And that visual is literally what it is. It's literally what it is. The traumatized children get frozen in time, locked up in the basement, and we build up all these forms of protection so we don't have to face that terror and that fear ever again. It's too scary. But the irony is that we're facing it every day.
True.
Because every single time that protection mechanism doesn't work, or something's out of control, or something is different than we planned, or we make a big move, or we get, burned or whatever, little girl starts to freak out and the protectors come back in. It's just boom, boom, boom. It's constant. It's constant. And so this is a undoing trauma, which is what this whole book is about, is a gentle, slow, steady process of retrieving those parts of ourselves that have been so exiled. But it can't be ripping the door open. It's just too extreme for our system to do that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I relate to the ripping the door open, and I think the thing that is so interesting about your book too is that it's so timely, because after the pandemic, everybody's traumatized.
Right. That's actually a really beautiful point. So first of all, everybody was already traumatized, but they were doing a really good job of containing it with their protectors. Alcohol, workaholism, going out to the bars, seeing friends, sex, porn, ... Pandemic hits, boom, all of our controlling mechanisms are lifted and ripped away from us. The world feels out of control. The world feels unsafe. So all of the protection that we've built up around ourselves to feel safe and in control is taken away. What happens? We're left with ourselves. We're left with the little children. And that's when people went one of two ways. One way, their protectors got louder and more extreme, or the other way, they started to just say, I'm going to start to do some work. I'm going to look a little closer.
Yeah.
That's where Happy Days lands in their hands, hopefully, if they are having that desire to do the work, and gives the guided path from trauma to profound freedom and inner peace. Because I believe that God gave me the gift of extreme trauma to live to tell what it means to be on the other side of it.
And remembering the sexual abuse in 2016, and then accepting the reality that that's what happened. There's so many tools in this book, but you really dove in like head first. And it feels like, this is what, your 9th book?
Mm-hmm.
These books come through you and through your lived experience, and you've tackled sobriety, and you are a widely followed and respected spiritual guide for folks. This is at a whole different level, though. And when you even wrote this, your publisher said that they were worried for you.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. My publishers, we have the same publisher. They called me up. First of all, I've submitted so many books to them, and it's always like, great, going to print, a few little copy edits. And I'm always like, thanks, So I expected that. I get an email from Patty and Michelle from Hay House, and they're like, we need to talk. What? Get on the phone with them. And they said to me, listen, Gabby, we're anxious for you. You're revealing one negative story after the next, and you're not showing your true strength. We're not seeing that girl with all the power on the stage and all of the books you've published. And I said to them, my ability to be this vulnerable is my true strength. And I could see the shift in them. I could really see it. And I also listened to them, because I think that there's, as a raconteur and as a guide for folks, sometimes you do need to know how much you want to reveal and how much you want to pull back. And there's a whole chapter that I took out, actually, just to sort of balance it a bit. So there was beautiful direction, but it was also very important for me to say to them, look, you've known me in one way, and that's a big part of who I am. But there's all these other parts that coexisted that I wasn't able to give voice to until now. And this is my moment. And it was funny. I did an interview with the gorgeous, most beautiful Ed Milet, just one of the most beautiful humans.
So fabulous. Yes.
A tremendous human. And we had such a gorgeous conversation. And Ed said to me, Gabby, why now? He's like, you're at the top of your game. You got all these books. You got these #1 New York Times bestsellers. Why would you reveal all this now? And I said, there's no way I couldn't. this is the greatest contribution I will ever give to the world. This is my greatest accomplishment that I must celebrate for myself and for others, to be able to look you and look everyone that I know in the eye and say, there is a way out. This is my path. This is the guided path from trauma to profound freedom and inner peace. You can identify yourself in my suffering because you have suffering too. And here's a way out. You don't have to do it exactly the way I did, but these are the steps.
What are the steps? Like, how do you begin? Like, I think a lot of people can relate to the cracking, because as you were telling the story of 2016, like, I can't, for me, I have been saying for 2 years, I can't handle one more thing. Like, I can't keep operating like this. I can't. So how does somebody recognize, number one, that there is that cracking? And number two, what is the next best couple things just to get started? Because obviously it's a long, slow, deep healing journey.
It is. It's a long, slow, deep healing journey. But what one of my readers said to me today in an interview, she said, I feel like Happy Days will take 5 to 10 years off of your therapy, because with the direction and the awareness and the understanding, it actually just fast forwards things for people, because it takes away all of the time that you need to figure it out, and then you can go deeper. But first steps for how do you know you're cracking into something? And this doesn't necessarily mean that you are remembering something that you dissociated from, but that you're accepting something that you've been running from. One is to accept that we're all running. Two, it's to start to notice some of the behavioral patterns, triggers, and the ways that you respond to them. So at first we can kind of begin to take an inventory of like the responses, right? The extreme ways that we react. So are you turning to drugs and alcohol? Are you overworking? Are you burning yourself out? Are you feeling extreme gastrointestinal issues? Are you having insomnia? Are you having a lot of physical conditions that you can't get a diagnosis for? Are you having extreme anxiety? Are you struggling to, not rage out of nowhere?
Right. Well, one of your theses is that I love, because it's very hopeful and it's true, is that there is you talk about the self with the capital S, and that there is a returning to that is desired by all of us. And in many ways, for me, this book felt not as much about trauma as it did about spirituality, because you can list all those negative things, but the flip side of this is that there is this, as you say, calm, confident, that there is a person in a self energy inside of you that you're trying to get back to. Yeah. And the cracking is a moment when you realize that all this running that you've been doing away from that calm, compassionate, confident self is no longer working.
Yeah. In many ways, the cracking is a great sign, because
it doesn't feel like it.
It definitely doesn't feel like it, but it's a great sign. Much as my therapist said, I said, why did I remember this now? I was 36 years old. And by the way, statistics show that most people don't remember their dissociated trauma until their 50s.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
I think the stat was like 80% or something crazy, my therapist told me. So when we're cracking, what's happening is, in my therapist's case, she said, you were safe enough to remember. You had gotten yourself to enough safety to remember. So I want to once again applaud you, because all the work that you've done on yourself, decades of devotional work that you've done for yourself and shared with the world, has gotten you to a place where you're safe enough now to crack into more. And it's fucking terrifying. But the best advice I could give anyone right out of the bat is to start to connect to that self energy. So how? So self is there. Self is ready to go. It's this totally loyal parent that's just ready to pick you up and the second that you ask for help. Self is qualities of curiosity. And so there's 3 questions you can start to ask yourself in the moment when the anxiety comes up. Instead of pushing the anxiety down, you can befriend it. And you can ask 3 questions. You can say, okay, what do I notice about the anxiety? So where does it live in my body? Would you want to do it with me right now?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Are you connected to the anxiety in this moment?
Not in this moment, but
Okay. Is there
I'm
something
very
else?
familiar with it, so I'm more than
Well, is
happy
there
to
anything
talk
else
about
that
it.
might be up right now that that's a protector part that you're like, I want to kind of talk to?
Um, it's interesting now that we're talking about it. I feel a little anxious.
Okay. Okay. So
Like
it's there.
I'm so programmed to run that staying still, which is what this new house in southern Vermont represents, this real quiet place. I feel tingly all over right now.
Okay. So there's a tingly, a desire to run, and then like this little anxiety kind of right back in the background.
Completely.
Okay, cool. Could we ask the tingliness and the desire to run to maybe just go in the go out on the patio and have a coffee and or have a cup of tea and just take a minute just to give us a little space to talk to the anxiety. Would that be okay with them?
Sure.
Okay. So just taking a moment to check in. You can close your eyes if you want, you can breathe, whatever you need, but just check in gently with the anxiety and ask, where is it in the body?
It's right here.
Right in your chest. Yeah, very
Yeah, like gripping like that.
gripping. Any other ways you would define it? Colors, shapes.
It's like kind of hands like this, and I'm also really warm under my armpits, but I'm not sure if that's menopause shit happening or what. But
Okay.
this and then right here.
Tight, warm. Does it have an age or a gender?
Oh, female and older.
Older. Okay.
Yeah.
Like older than you are now?
Yeah, I think. I don't know. I don't think of myself as 50s, but
No, but is it like when you say older, like 80s or like older,
I just
like
feel like these like witch hands. It's really fucking
witchy?
weird. Yeah.
Witchy. Okay, cool. Witchy. Anything else that you notice about it?
As I talk about it, it sort of like pulls back a little.
Okay. What do you know about it?
It's familiar.
Does it have any stories or visuals that attach to it?
More like the first words that came to mind is, I don't like this. I don't want to be here.
Okay, that's the part that's coming in that's saying, I don't like this, I don't want to be there, is another part. It's a protector. Would that protector feel safe enough to go have some tea for a moment?
I'll send that protector outside the office. Hang
Yeah.
on, see who's
And I want to
sitting.
thank that protector and just let that protector know that I've totally got you and I'm not going to take anxiety to anywhere that they don't need to go. Really high level right here. We're not going to go anywhere we shouldn't go today. Okay. I just want to thank that protector for coming in and just say, have a tea, but thank you so much for speaking up. Thank you. So with a little bit more permission just to talk to this part, what is the anxious part need?
The first thing that came up was a hug, reassurance, that I don't have to do this on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. Does that part of you know that you are here? That your self, that your resourced, undamaged self, does it know that you're here?
I think so. I think, so. And the reason why I say it like that is because I think one of the things that I've been struggling with for so long because of workaholism and being busy and on the move as kind of my go-to protector. As long as I'm on the move, I'm going to be okay. As long as I'm busy. I have had a deep feeling of loneliness.
Yeah. So the
And-
part,
Yeah, and being in a quiet place up here makes me feel really lonely.
okay. Okay. Thank you for saying that. How do you feel towards the part?
I feel sad towards her, tired of feeling lonely. I get it. It's painful.
So she knows you're here and you have some compassion for her. I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but
Yeah. Oh, sure.
yeah. Okay. Beautiful. If she wasn't in such an extreme role of doing, and anxious,
Yeah.
what else would she be doing?
She'd be hanging out with her friends.
Hanging out with her friends. Okay.
Laughing a lot. She'd be doing fun shit. I don't know. Going for a hike.
Going for a hike. Okay. Would you be there? Self? Okay. In your own mind's eye, can you just take a moment to just visualize taking her by the hand and or however it visualizes for you, however it comes to your vision,
Mm-hmm.
taking her on that hike,
Mm-hmm.
see who's around, see whatever comes up. You can tell me whatever comes up, whatever you want to share.
I can totally see it. Totally. There's a black bear that is out with her cubs up there. And so I just see us walking down the path and there's the black bear.
How does she feel with you on the hike?
Happy that I'm there.
Yeah. And is there anything that you want to say to her on this hike?
I'm not going anywhere.
Can you make a commitment to her right now that when you notice her, you can just take her by the hand and go on the hike and remind her that you're not going anywhere?
Is when you say notice her, are you talking about when that feeling comes back? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. When the anxiety
Yeah.
starts to come in, can you just let her know?
I am not going to let you be there alone.
Right. And make a commitment maybe that you'll just take her on that hike. Maybe even literally go for a hike with her.
Totally.
Beautiful. How does she feel now? Just to close it out, how does she feel?
I think some of the protectors have come back in.
Okay. That's okay. They're welcome back. They're welcome back, Mel, because
They're like,
not-
and I don't want to go to hike. Like
that's okay. That's okay. They're welcome back. I want to thank them for stepping aside for the time that they did. They did a beautiful job. They are welcome back. We can always ask them to step aside when there's some space, but right now it's okay. They can come back. You now have what you have right now, Mel, is direct access from self to the part. It's so beautiful to witness. You have direct access from your adult resourced internal parent self to the part of you that's so protective and anxious. And you've given her a full media alert that you are available to her when she needs you.
Yeah.
Major step forward.
I want to just unpack that for everybody that's watching this and listening. And that is that here's what I got from it. When you feel the anxiety take over, take a breath, go into your body, locate where it is.
Notice
it. And then you had me visualize the color or the gender or the shape of it.
That's getting to know. What do I know about it? Mm-hmm.
What do I know about it? And then you asked me if I had other experiences where I had felt the same thing. Is that the next thing that happened?
We go into what does it need?
What does it need? What does it need? And I said a hug.
Usually what you'll hear when you ask
Yeah.
parts what they need, they'll say, I need to play. I need a hug. I need to be creative. It's always the stuff that we want as a kid. The stuff we didn't get.
You actually write about this in your book with your son.
Yeah.
The 4 S's. What are they?
Yeah. So this IFS is broken down in chapter 7, which is called Love Every Part. And then there's another chapter called Reparenting Yourself, where I had this massive aha moment that all the parenting advice that I was getting from Dan Siegel and all the beautiful psychologists out there that do therapy for children was so profound when working and co-creating with my son. And I thought to myself, well, nobody ever did this for me. And instead of being pissed about that, I said, wait a second, I can do that for me. I can give myself that hug. I can use the 4 S's, as Dan says, to be seen, safe, soothed, and secure. I can create that environment for myself internally. That was a big change for me. That was a big turning point.
One of the things that you also introduce is this heart hold. So can
Yes.
you walk everybody through that? Because I think that is a way that you can provide those things to yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And it's actually something I really want to recommend to you right now, because when I was cracking, this hold was something that really, really helped me on a moment to moment basis. So placing your hand on your heart and your other hand on your belly, and just notice which hand is most natural to your heart. For me, it's the right.
Yeah, the right.
You just went right to the right. So it's the right. Some people it's the left. So really have to decide what's right for you. The other hand on the belly, and just take a deep breath in and extend your diaphragm. And on the exhale, just relax your diaphragm and just keep with that belly breath, taking a deep breath in and letting it go. Another deep breath in and let it go. And you might even affirm things to yourself. I'm safe right now. I have so much compassion towards all of my parts. My self energy is here with me. Even just doing the hold is enough right now to settle my system, to help me get back into that parasympathetic state, to just feel relief.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Go to it all day.
It's nice
Another-
on the belly too. Really nice.
Really nice. Another one would be tapping on the gamut point. So there's a point between the ring finger and the middle finger called the gamut
On the
point.
outside of the hand, right?
On the back side of the hand. Yep. And I like to call this point the holy shit point. When I was early in the trauma recovery, I was terrified of getting in an elevator. Why? It's out of control, right?
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The elevator, I was coming out of the trauma, and the elevator was just the scariest thing for me. So I had to do this. There was times I had to get in an elevator. And so I was tapping that point.
And what does that do?
This point sends a message to the amygdala that it's safe to relax. When you tap that point, you also want to take the benefit of affirming the desired feeling. I am safe. I am safe. I am safe.
Wow. That's so cool. So how long did that last, to be nervous about getting into an elevator?
A few months. I did a lot of EMDR, which I write about in the book, eye movement sensitization and reprocessing.
Yeah.
Really beneficial. Could be great when you're in a crisis. And by the way, offline, I have a person for you.
Oh, I'm already doing it.
Good.
Yes, you're right. It is extremely helpful.
Gives you this, it gives you a settled sense of safety and helps you reprocess even the minor things in the moment. And the stuff that we just did, the body work, that's based on somatic experiencing, which is a body-based trauma therapy. And so as you can see, there's a through line between all the therapies that I chose. And that is, I believe that they're all very therapeutic yet spiritual practices.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I found your book and your work, especially as it's evolved, to be really profound in the spiritual connection to mental health, to healing. And so how would you describe that?
The therapies that I was drawn to, I know my guide, spirit, God led me to them. because they were going to resonate with me most. And the reason I believe that they have such strong spiritual undertones is IFS, connect to self. So for years, I was teaching A Course in Miracles. We have the ego and we have our higher self, and our higher self can dissolve the ego through the experience of forgiveness. Protector parts, self energy, self can dissolve through compassion, forgiveness, courage, creativity. It's all the same thing, just a different way of accessing it. The EMDR I loved so deeply because it allowed me to work with the subconscious and to not have to recall big things, but just allow. I fell deeply, madly in love with somatic experiencing because it let my body do the work, which is a very spiritual experience. And it got me out of the storyline and into the body. And I believe that the people who founded, particularly knowing some of them, I think that they're very spiritual people, though they may not be able to admit that in their clinical environments. But there's such a through line. And I also just believe that God gives us what we can handle, but also what we resonate with.
Well, can we connect the dots between what you just said about God giving you not only what you can handle, but what you resonate with, and the fact that you are somebody that people around the world come to for learning how to manifest,
Right.
and talk to me and us, anybody who's watching, about the connection between manifesting and this cracking open, that you are attracting something that you need when
Yeah.
you go down this journey.
Well, what I'm really proud of is that my books on manifesting aren't really manifesting light. They're deep books, like Super Attractor, Manifest a Life Beyond Your Wildest Dreams. Okay, I hooked you in, but now I get you to work. And these books, The Universe Has Your Back. These are books on how to manifest, but they're books on how to undo the blocks to the presence of that super attractor power that we all have.
Yes.
And so the more we crack open to. Amma said that, and Amma, the hugging saint, she said that when an eggshell cracks from the outside, it's broken. But when it cracks from the inside, it's reborn. So that cracking is rebirthing into the truth of who you are, the self within you, the super attractor power within you. And the more you release the blocks to the presence of that self energy, the closer you get to becoming just a more aligned human. And when I say aligned human, I mean a human having a human experience with a direct line to higher level consciousness, whether you call that compassion, courage, curiosity.
At the end of the day, it's all that capital S self energy.
That's right.
Is what you're talking about. So,
which is the same as spiritual energy, which is the same as listening to a spirit guide, which is the same as it's the voice of love. It's the undamaged resource soul of who we are.
I think that's the simplest way to say it, that trauma is blocking you from accessing the source of who you are.
Yes.
And that is love.
And let's just call it unresolved trauma is the block, because the trauma, when transcended, can be one of the greatest gifts you've ever received.
How do you think we heal trauma if we don't have the resources to go to therapy or do workshops or whatever it may be? Even if we do have resources, we don't have the
Right.
courage to put ourselves out there. How do we start to heal trauma within our body?
Excellent question. So we did a whole project for Audible Original called Take Control. That was all about, the thesis was this: any area of your life that you're stuck, I am willing to bet everything I have that you have a trauma pattern from your past that you've never healed.
Mm-hmm.
You got a boss that is abusive, guarantee you this has to do with a trauma pattern from your past. You can't succeed in the areas you want. You can't lose the weight. There's some pattern from your past. So the first thing is recognizing that you actually experienced trauma. And I am a huge proponent, as so many people are, of widening the definition, because I think up until about 5 years ago, most of us thought that trauma just meant, okay, you were in active duty, or you were in a huge accident or incident that was highly traumatic, or you survived some sort of physical, sexual, whatever abuse. Trauma is just about any kind of experience that you witness or you absorb that has your nervous system light up on edge and start warning you. So if you've ever had, like, you could have a critical parent and you just brace for them. You could have a parent that drinks like crazy and you brace at 5 o'clock because you know they're coming home. You could have been abandoned by a parent, or have a parent that was mentally ill, or have a parent that was so on your ass because they wanted you to be a pro football player. And so you were constantly on edge. It's when your nervous system fires up to a state of alert that now gets programmed into your body as a response. There's a reason why so many couples at 5 o'clock at night start bickering. And it has to do with the fact that at 5 o'clock is typically when a lot of parents 20 years ago were coming home from work. And that's when the arguing would start. And so what happens when you witness that or you feel it is, as a kid, you're now in a state where you're on edge.
Wow.
I see you rocking in your chair.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I mean, I just remember, it's funny. There's a lot of good things that usually happen to our childhood, but we just seem to remember a lot of the bad stuff. And it's because it's,
why, right?
Because the trauma, just like in your nervous system, I guess.
And also your mind is wired in a way to prioritize the negative, because your mind defaults to negative. So you got to build up the programming to positive.
Exactly.
This isn't just woo woo. This is actually science. People.
I know. So I remember, the memories of the past. I always have to remind myself of all the positive stuff that, my parents did all the time and what they were going through and giving them grace and all these different things. But I remember, when my dad would get home, you didn't know what type of day it was going to be for him. It was like either a thunder coming through the wooden floors with his wooden shoes and like being angry and upset, or it was like the loving father that would take me out and play catch in the backyard. So I have to constantly remind myself of like the positive, which I'm certain it was 90% of the time was good, but those 10% of the time, creates that clinching mode, like you said.
Well, let me explain what happens. So there's a really interesting concept called ghosts in the nursery. And so trauma patterns get automated because they're not experienced in your brain, they're felt in your nervous system. And so it's why you can have a pattern from your past, but be completely unaware that it's running your life right now, because it's stored not in your conscious thought, but in your nervous system. And you feel it in your body before it even gets into your head. And so there's this concept called ghosts in the nursery, which basically means there's all kinds of that goes on when you're little that you may or may not remember in your mind, but your body remembers it. So for example, if you had parents that were just stressed out and they come home and they've been busy and you're sitting there playing on the floor and there's toys everywhere, and mom or dad's reaction to a mess is to scream, that creates this kind of thing in your nervous system. Now, you may not remember that episode that happened on May 17th, 1972, but your nervous system remembers what it's like. So fast forward, you're now 51 years old and you walk in the house and there's a mess everywhere. And even though you have said, I'm not going to bulldoze and yell at anybody, my body recognizes the situation. So what do? You repeat the pattern you saw. And so what I'm working on right now is a pattern that is encoded in my nervous system. I was trying to create a video 2 days ago for Share the Mic now. Trying to create a video, and I'm like doing take after take because I want to get it right. And my daughter comes waltzing into the room and was like, how long are you going to be doing this? And I was like, can't you see that I'm working? I literally like screamed at her. And she looked at me, Lewis, and she goes, you have a real problem.
Wow. How old is your daughter?
20. And I said, I calmly said, you're right, I do. When I get interrupted, I lose control of the response, and I'm working so hard. And the way that you, and I'm clearly not mastering this yet, but the way that you do it is as you feel it rise up, you have to, you can use the 5-second rule, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can use just take a quick breath. You can notice the pattern, and you've got to create a pause between the emotion rising up and the reaction that gets automated. And for many people, the reaction, Lewis, is to run away. It's to leave the room. It's to avoid the confrontation. It was just easy, oh, hold on, let me let the clock go.
Even though you hate being interrupted by anything, this is a great interruption.
See, I did. Like I didn't do the bulldoze. I was calm because it wasn't a human being. I'm only mean to human beings. I know, a lot of people run away. They avoid conflict. They say it's just easier. But if running away and avoiding conflict continues to create a pattern where you feel invisible and your boundaries are tromped on, that's a pattern. And, here's the other thing about patterns. Running away and being quiet might have saved you when you were little. Because if you were quiet and out of the room, you didn't get hit, you didn't get yelled at, you were out of harm's way. So when you were little, it was a genius pattern because it protected you. But the issue for adults is that, again, we walk around with the patterns that we created when we were 8 years old in different situations than we are in now. And now we are completely a robot to these patterns. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for checking this video out. And if you like this one, I have a feeling you're going to like this one too. I'll see you there.